Good afternoon, everyone. I'm speaking to you today from Chilliwack, the traditional territory of the Stolo peoples. Today we're providing an update on Highway 4, which, as you know, has been closed since last Tuesday because of the Cameron Bluffs wildfire. In a moment, Ministry staff will provide the latest information on the highway and the detour that's been in place for essential travel and the movement of goods. I'd like to say that at the outset, although this section of Highway 4 is relatively short, the impact of the fire has been significant. As you'll see shortly from images from the site, the mountainside above the highway is incredibly steep, and the site is extremely challenging for both wildfire crews and Ministry staff and contractors. That topography made the fire particularly dangerous, with rocks, trees, and other falling debris falling onto the roadway. That's why we had to close the highway to keep everyone safe. We know that Highway 4 is a vital connection to Port Alberni, Tofino, Ucluelet, and Banfield, and other island communities. And I understand the closure has created major challenges for locals, for businesses, and tourists, and we are anxious to get the road open as quick as possible. But obviously safety is our #1 priority, and we cannot reopen the highway until we know that the traveling public will be safe. Right now, our geotechnical engineers are on site looking at that challenging slope above the road. It's very dangerous work, and they need to make sure that the cliff face is stable and that the highway and people who use it will be protected. As we've said from the outset, even when the fire is out, it will take some additional time to implement measures that will allow people to travel safely. While crews are acting with urgency, we will have to take whatever time is needed to ensure safety. At this point, we expect the highway to be fully closed for at least another week. This is necessary to allow crews to remove dangerous trees and other hazards, to make any road repairs necessary, and to set up protective barriers that may be required to keep people safe when the road is reopened. Once the highway opens, it will not be fully open right away. We are expecting single lane alternating traffic for some period of time in and around the Cameron Bluffs site. Ministry staff will be providing more details shortly in terms of the work ahead and what that looks like, what this phased reopening will look like as well. And as we have for the past week, we'll continue to provide updates through travel advisories and on our Drive BC website. I want to acknowledge the uncertainty that this closure has caused, and I want to extend a deep thanks to the people in island communities who are affected by this closure, for their patience, for their understanding, and for the spirit and example of helping one another during difficult times. I also want to thank the mayors, councillors, regional district directors, and their staff, as well as First Nations governments, for the tremendous help and support that they have provided. Local governments and the regional districts and First Nations governments have been in constant communication with their citizens to ensure that people are both safe and well informed, and they have also supported my ministry staff as we established the detour from Port Alberni through to Lake Cowichan. That detour, though far from ideal, has kept food, fuel, and other supplies on the move to the people that need them. Thank you also to the forestry companies, Mosaic, Sawalkan, Western Forest Products, for stepping up to help us open that essential detour route. The route includes their privately owned forest roads, and we appreciate very much the company's support for our communities during this very challenging situation. We also appreciate the support and the role that the BC trucking industry has provided to keep commercial vehicles rolling with those vital supplies. They've helped to make sure that there is food on grocery stores and that there is fuel available for citizens who can no longer use Highway 4 for the time being. On the weekend, we began 4 daily scheduled piloted convoys for commercial vehicles carrying essential goods and services. Commercial vehicles can also travel outside those convoy times without pilots, and we have several checkpoints that are being staffed along the detour route to provide information to essential travelers. I also want to give a very sincere thanks to BC Wildlife Service for all of the work that they have done to fight this fire in very challenging terrain. They have done a tremendous job dealing with the fire, removing unsafe trees above the highway, and creating safer conditions that will help us get the road open as quickly as possible. And finally, I want to acknowledge my ministry staff and our contractors who have been working flat and the repairs needed to reopen Highway 4 and to keep the detour route available and safe. And with that, I will now turn things over to Janelle State, who is our Regional Deputy Director of Highway Services, for an overview of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. As the Minister said, I'm the Deputy Director with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and joining today from the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. So I'm going to start by providing an update on the Highway 4 closure. On this map, this gives a sense of where the fire is in relation to Highway 4. So we first had the notification of the fire on last weekend, June 3rd, and we actually implemented the highway closure on Tuesday, June 6th, so 1 week ago as of today. Moving on to our next slide here, let's talk about the impacts on Highway 4. So the fire is adjacent to 1.5 kilometers of the Highway 4. In that kilometer stretch, we are seeing a significant slope above the highway. We are having concerns around danger trees falling onto the highway. Small and medium-sized rocks continue to fall onto the highway. Even as of today, we are seeing rocks the size of coffee mugs coming down onto the highway. So some significant hazards that our team needs to be aware of and mindful of as we consider the next steps for Highway 4. The pavement condition remains intact, even though we have seen some fairly significant trees come down onto the highway. However, we do have some pieces of roadside barrier that have been dislodged and do require some repairs. So we look at our actions on Highway 4. We've been working closely with BC Wildfire Services on a daily basis, working closely with our incident commands team to make sure that there is no time lost and that we're very coordinated with our agencies. At this point, we are waiting for an assessment from BC Wildfire Services to enable our contractor to get in there and start doing critical works. But at this point, BC Wildfire Services is undertaking danger tree assessments along the slope. They started that work yesterday and have been regularly assessing about half of the slope, and they're continuing onwards with those danger tree assessments today. In that, worker safety is paramount. This is a very, very challenging topography in this area, and we need to ensure that it's safe for the BC Wildfire Services assessor to be in there, and also safe for our staff to be on the ground when we do have that okay. We do acknowledge that there is an upcoming weather system coming in later this week on Thursday. We do anticipate seeing some rain there that may slow the efforts of both the assessment as well as the falling of the trees that are needed. At this point, there is not a full count on the number of danger trees because it is in progress, but there are a number of trees tagged for controlled cuts as well as other treatment to be able to eliminate those hazards above the highway. And we are continuing to monitor rockfall on a daily basis to assess where those trends are happening and the frequency and regularity of that rockfall. So just to be clear, the slope itself remains intact. However, the debris on the slope has been loosened as a result of the wildfire, and that is the piece that we are concerned about from a technical perspective. We do have ministry and maintenance contract equipment on standby as soon as we have that okay from BC Wildfire Services from a safety perspective to go in. Early this morning, we did get the request to bring in one piece of equipment to start moving some of the trees that have fallen onto the road off the highway. But at this point, we have the equipment on standby and staged ready to go. As we talk about some of the challenges on Highway 4, I wanted to share this photo that was taken on Sunday. And the yellow dashed line gives the sense of the burned area upslope of Highway 4. So Highway 4 is just at the base of Cameron Lake, and you see that large dashed line that goes up fairly significantly. The assessors are about half to two-thirds of the way up that slope undertaking their assessment for danger trees. However, you can see that it is very challenging topography that they are working in and a very real and significant concern for debris coming down onto Highway 4. As you'll see in the photo, we have some trees that are green and some trees are red. Red are the trees that have been burned all the way up to the top of the tree. The green ones haven't necessarily candled all the way to the top, but we have heard from BC Wildfire Services that those trees are burning actually in some cases from the inside at the root level. So although the damage may not appear extensive on the tops of the trees, there are concerns from a danger tree perspective. And the photo on the left gives a very good image of the volatility of those trees, be it in a wind or a rain event, which is why that danger tree assessment needs to happen so that we can ensure those trees are coming down in a very predictable manner. At this point, we've seen nearly 24 trees fall unexpectedly onto Highway 4. Some of those trees have been 1 meter in diameter. So very, very large trees that we are seeing come down in an unpredictable manner, which just reaffirms the importance of having the danger tree assessment done and controlled activities taken in advance of any next steps as it relates to Highway 4. Since the highway was closed, we were able to implement a detour operation on June 7th. So with that detour operation, we have been doing 24/7 monitoring, both with our own internal contractors as well as ministry staff. We have extensive pieces of equipment out there, and I will list some of those to give you a magnitude of deployment from the ministry's perspective, just as it relates to the detour. We have 8 changeable message signs out there helping to guide drivers safely through this detour route. We've deployed 12 porta potties to provide some services and washroom facilities for travelers on this very remote route. We have 4 water trucks that are going 24/7 to help with the control of dust along this corridor. We have 2 graders working out there to help with the surface condition of the corridor. We have 3 pilot vehicles, which I'll get to shortly in our presentation, to help with the movement of commercial goods. We have 20 other pieces of equipment that are helping out with various purposes along the corridor. And we have over 30 individual ministry staff and maintenance contractors out there. So this is a huge deployment of resources to make sure that this detour route stays open and operates effectively for essential goods and movement. Generally, in terms of the operation of the detour, we have, it is a very unique route in the sense that it is a mix of private industrial roads as well as Forest Service roads. We have, as the minister mentioned, had great support from these private companies in being able to use this route, but it is a different route than a traditional highway travel. It's 90 kilometers long. That may not seem long, but it is a gravel road. It does have narrow pieces of infrastructure along the way, 13 single lane bridges where folks need to yield to oncoming traffic. There's no cell service along the route, nor is there gas. So a fairly remote facility, and really trying to encourage that essential travel only and have folks really consider whether or not that trip is critical. As we look at the volumes on the detour route, for comparison, on typical summer months, we see approximately 15,000 vehicles traveling between Port Alberni and Parksville. Currently, we're seeing approximately 500 to 1,000 vehicles traveling along the detour route, and the detour route is operating very effectively with that level of traffic volumes on there. So it is encouraging to see that drivers are considering whether or not that trip is essential and making the choice to remain home if they're able to. We are seeing traffic volumes die down fairly significantly in the evening periods, which again is great. It is a remote road, a gravel condition, and are encouraging travelers to head out in daylight if possible. And we are seeing a high volume of commercial traffic along the road, which is exceptional. As we move along, let's talk about our commercial vehicles on it. We had actually set up since Friday of last week a supply chain call with distributors and goods movers, as well as local government, First Nations, Ministry of Agriculture, and EMCR. And with that, we were hearing some concerns around the movement of goods in and out of the West Coast. As of Sunday, July 11th, we initiated a piloted convoy of vehicles. So we have 3 pilot vehicles in the convoy. It travels 2 times in the eastbound direction towards Port Alberni and 2 times in the westbound direction towards Lake Cowichan. So in that convoy, it really enables commercial vehicles to travel with the assistance of the pilot vehicles that warns oncoming traffic of these commercial vehicles staged in a very strategic manner. When I spoke earlier of the single lane bridges along the way, what it helps is to warn motorists of those vehicles approaching. We saw some limited uptake on the weekend as we got this out there fairly quickly. However, since then, we've seen upwards of 12 vehicles in these commercial vehicle convoys. So we know that goods and services are getting to and from the Alberni Valley. We actually were in contact with a fuel supplier who intends to stage 5 vehicles tomorrow morning in our 5 a.m. convoy leaving Lake Cowichan towards Port Alberni. So we know that these goods are getting through, and we will continue to work with them from the pilot car perspective to make sure that that continues to happen in a very safe way. Now, as we move towards the phased reopening of Highway 4, as I spoke earlier, we continue to see hazards along the highway from a danger tree perspective, as well as rock falls. We do have a strategy for a danger tree assessment and falling of those danger trees. And we are trending in the right direction as it relates to those rockfall hazards. And we are seeing fewer hazards coming down. And we are starting to understand exactly where those rocks are coming down in a more predictable manner. So with that, we have actually worked closely with our engineers to develop some interim mitigation measures to enable us to work towards a staged reopening of Highway 4. So those measures include two different treatments. One treatment is a metal containment fencing. It's a netting that will be supported by cranes hung up in very key areas where we are still seeing some rockfall hazards coming down. And that's the image that you see depicted on the screen. We also intend to install some lock blocks 2 height tall, and that again will help catch any sort of errant material that is coming down the slope. So for a local reference of Angel Rock, there is going to be in and around that area is where we see the bulk of the materials continuing to come down right now. And those are our areas of focus. So right now we have the materials that are on its way to site. Some of it has already arrived at the site and some of it in delivery, to make sure that we're set up to be able to start installing those measures as soon as we have those danger trees out of the way and that we can have our contractors working in there safely. For the mitigation measures, we expect it'll take about 5 days to be able to install those various measures adjacent to Cameron Lake. And at that point, we'll be in a position to start by next weekend, have Highway 4 open to single lane alternating traffic. And after it reopens, we do intend to continue to monitor the upslope conditions, both from a rockfall perspective as well as a danger tree perspective, to see if we're continuing to see errant material come down onto Highway 4. That monitoring will take place for about 2 weeks. And we will also put a close eye on the weather as we move through that. As I mentioned earlier, rain and wind on a slope that's been affected by a wildfire has some concerns that we need to be very mindful of. So we may have to make some choices around the highway at that point if we do see some extreme weather conditions come in, but it's something our team is looking at very closely. So at this point, it probably is looking like mid-July where we will be at a full reopening of Highway 4. As we look to next weekend and the reopening from a single lane alternating traffic perspective, I must be clear that we expect that there will be significant queues. So this still needs to be an essential traffic only. Folks really need to consider whether or not that trip to and from the West Coast is critical or whether or not it can wait. We will continue to have our maintenance contractor fully deployed on the detour route to ensure that there are 2 options for people wanting to get in and out of the West Coast. However, we do anticipate that there will be lengthy delays on Highway 4 as we reopen to single lane alternating traffic. We will continue to work closely with local governments and as well as industry to consider a staged or piloted fashion for really that essential goods and commercial goods and traffic. But more to come on that as we get closer to next weekend. So with that, Minister, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Janelle, and I'll now open up and invite questions.
Thank you very much. A reminder to media on the line, please press star 1 to enter the queue. You'll be limited to 1 question and 1 follow-up. Our first question today comes from Rob Fleming, CTV Vancouver Island. Please go ahead, Rob.
Oh, thank you for taking my question. Obviously, it'll be encouraging news for folks to hear that by the 24th or 25th, there'll be some traffic on Highway 4. But if I understand what I just heard, that will only be essential traffic that is advised there. So tourist communities like Tofino should not expect tourists to be encouraged or recommended to travel there until mid-July, probably. Is that correct? And can you, if I'm understanding that, can you speak to the impact of what that will be on those communities?
So let me start, and then I'll ask Janelle to talk a bit more in detail about the phased reopening. This is a live plan that is based on what we're observing and the safety measures that we need to put in place to reopen the highway, first as a single alternating traffic and getting through to mid-July. These are targeted dates which we are basing on geotechnical surveys, which are continuing right now, and also putting in the safety measures that were described on that route. We know that the tourism community and the business community and locals have been working very well with the ministry on how we can utilize the alternate route and how we will be able to use the Highway 4 once it's restored. We'll update the public, as I mentioned, regularly, both through Drive BC and through updates like this, and we'll have more information as we get closer to the determination around when we'll enter phase 1, which is reopening to single lane alternating traffic and a full reopening. Janelle?
Sure. With the single lane alternating traffic, our engineers are currently working on a traffic management plan to really limit the delay to motorists. So if we see an opportunity to limit the size of that single lane alternating traffic zone and still ensure that it can operate safely from an upslope hazard as well as a queued vehicle perspective, we'll certainly look at making those measures and implementations along the way once we get to that point of having it open. But we do expect some significant delays. I don't expect those are going to be as long as taking the alternate route, but I do want to warn motorists that there will be some delays as we move towards this phased reopening.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I want to confirm that I'm understanding correctly. So as things stand, I know things are fluid, but as things stand currently, the recommendation at this point will be only essential traffic using Highway 4, even when it gets up on June 24th, alternating traffic. Will the same recommendation continue to apply to that detour route? And I guess if I could, I'm also wondering about, there's been discussion that the situation has highlighted the need for some kind of significant detour that would be more effective, like an hour route, the Horn Lake route. Is there further thought to perhaps making that more viable in the future?
I think maybe I'll just start there, and certainly we will look after Highway 4 is reopened in the coming weeks and months about that kind of access and secondary routes. There have been some improvements on the current alternate route, which is why it was selected, that make it the most drivable, desirable alternate that we could open. We put the cautions on there and made it for essential travel because we don't want it overly congested, for one thing. And we also want to make sure that people are fully prepared for the conditions there. It's a gravel road. It is not a paved highway, and you know, there are people who are inexperienced in that way. And of course, the first priority is to make sure that towns that are cannot be accessed by Highway 4 right now are not running out of goods and essential items like fuel. I do also want to praise mayors and others who have been urging their citizens that there is no need to panic buy. As you heard from Janelle, significant numbers of commercial trucks are getting through, store shelves are being restocked, fuel is arriving, and so all of those who have been involved in retailing and in local government leadership positions who've been relaying accurate, up-to-date information about that, thank you very much for doing so.
Our next question comes from Rob Shaw, Check News.
Oh, hi there. Just to kind of follow up on that, I guess, is there any economic aid being planned for the businesses that are affected here? There's, you know, ongoing financial losses. There's a dairy farmer literally pouring milk out. What is being done to help them financially, I guess, for the next month at least, as they deal with limited ability to handle the situation?
Yeah, we know exactly what kind of impacts this is having on businesses of all types in these communities, and we're in close contact with them. The business community has reached out to us with ideas and suggestions. We work to implement all of them that we can achieve, and we're looking forward to further discussions on a daily basis, really, to see how we can mitigate that, make sure that supplies are getting through, and that goods can get to market destinations out of the Alberni Valley, for example, to their destination. It's a little early to say if the federal government will assist businesses, but as you've heard the federal government recently say, they expect this summer to be the worst fire season in a century in Canada. It's significantly affected businesses in parts of the country like Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Ontario, and now certain areas of British Columbia. So we have certainly reached out to the federal government to see what we can do to help businesses that are being put under some stress by this devastating wildfire season that's happening in many, many parts of Canada.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Sure. I guess, are there any provincial programs that you could activate that would also give aid? And then could I just also ask, on the convoys themselves, do you know how much sort of food and fuel and supplies are getting through versus what the community needs? And as we plot out, the next week and then maybe month, is there going to be enough of those items to prevent any rationing having to be done? Or is it the sort of expectation that even as these reopen, the limited nature of the traffic that can get through is going to require some type of sort of rationing on the ground in the community?
So I'll ask Janelle to answer your question, Rob, about the volume of commercial vehicles getting through and the types of goods that they're carrying, as well as service providers that are getting through to those communities. What I would say, though, again, about business supports is our focus so far has obviously been on fire suppression, on safety, on coming up with a plan to reopen this highway safely as soon as we can. That's where all of our efforts are, and it's also been to work closely with the business community to see what kind of challenges they're experiencing, to help them with shortages of goods, and to update them on all the information that we have about the situation as it unfolds. I mentioned in an earlier question that we have reached out to the federal government because this is a national challenge this summer during this wildfire season. It's being talked about around the world, particularly in the United States, where smoke has drifted and affected air quality significantly. British Columbia is working with other provinces about the kinds of business supports that may be available, given that disaster financial assistance is available in other situations.
As for the volumes of commercial vehicles, we are seeing quite an array of commercial vehicles. We are seeing fuel trucks and a hefty number of those getting through. We do understand from suppliers that some of them traditionally would carry a B train, which would be 2 fuel tanks in a single tractor combination. However, they are now carrying 1 fuel truck in 1 fuel tanker. But we do understand, again, from the convoy tomorrow, that we have 5 fuel trucks that are going through as part of it. So I think from a fuel perspective, we are seeing the needs getting to and from the West Coast, albeit a little bit less of a supply than the typical demand is. What we're also hearing from the West Coast communities is that we are telling drivers that there is no gas along the detour route and to make sure to fuel up in advance of departing. So I think it's just being cautious of making sure if that trip is or isn't essential, and knowing that once you hit Lake Cowichan, there will indeed be fuel and services to gain from that perspective. We're also seeing grocery vehicles head through there. We understand from the Ministry of Agriculture that milk and agricultural feed trucks are getting to and from along the detour. And just this morning, we had a conversation with the Ministry of Health and pharmacies in the area to ensure that those prescriptions can get to and from. I think at this point, it's part of it is just education around the detour road to understand for commercial drivers what to expect on a road that wouldn't be their typical route to travel in and out of the West Coast.
Our next question comes from Mira Bain, CBC. Our next question comes from Mira Bain, CBC.
Sir, this question is, Mr. I'm wondering about flights. Is there any efforts to reduce the fees for flights, as some people do want to get out of Tofino, but they say that the flights are just too expensive at this point? I know there were some efforts to have some of the airlines bring down the cost of flights when Coquihalla was shut down. I'm wondering whether something can be done in this case.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I don't have an update, but certainly we are reaching out to regional and national airlines to see whether they could do that. There is a decent airport in the Tofino-Ucluelet Peninsula, and I know that some flight providers have stepped up their schedule already. The national airlines, as you've mentioned, did do this to help people get to Kelowna and beyond when the Coquihalla was not available during those 35 days that we had to restore it. and they did discount flights as they promised. So I imagine we'll have more to say about that in the coming days. But certainly we're mindful and working with the air transport sector on this.
Follow-up, Mira?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thanks very much. Our next question comes from Daryl Greer, Canadian Press.
This question is better for the minister or the state, but I'm wondering about the conditions that would perhaps be...
Sorry, Daryl, I'm going to interrupt you there. We can't quite hear you here on site. I'm wondering if you can take yourself off speakerphone or Bluetooth if possible, and we'll give it another go.
Oh, I'm on neither Bluetooth. I'm sorry, the reception here isn't always good. Is that better?
No, unfortunately. We're going to let you work with our phone contractor for a second. We're going to go to the next question, and we'll come back to you at the end, okay? We will go to Wolf Deppner, Black Press, next.
Thank you for taking my question. A question for the Minister. Obviously, this is a live situation, so the situation is unfolding, but what, if any, lessons are emerging right now that might be of use in other parts of the province that might experience similar issues in the future as this wildfire season progresses?
Okay. So I was having a little bit of a sound problem just at the beginning of your question. If you could just repeat that, Wolf, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Of course, my apologies. The situation is, of course, a live one. The situation is evolving. But based on what you're learning so far, what are some of the lessons emerging for possible other similar situations, similar circumstances in other parts of the province as this wildfire season progresses?
Yeah, I think some of the learnings are the coordination that we've done with BC Wildfire Services, as well as other emergency response and between ministries is going to be essential for what is predicted to be a long, hot, dry summer, being alert to efforts and also some international coordination as well and out-of-province coordination. It's difficult, though, because many parts of Canada are facing similar wildfire challenges, but I know that the Minister of Forests and the Minister responsible for emergency management will have an update later this week on how they're preparing communities for the wildfire season that we expect is ahead of us, and giving some different scenarios about some of the risks out there and how we're managing those. Janelle, you may have some comments from the field based on the response to Highway 4 as well.
I think our ministry staff continues to work really closely with our maintenance contractor, and we've had conversations with our colleagues across the province just to make sure that that relationship continues to thrive as we go into this season. Our maintenance contractors have been remarkable in deploying whatever services and equipment that we need and in no time at all, and that will continue to be a priority of importance as we move into this wildfire season in other parts of the province.
Wolf, do you have a follow-up? Wolf, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. How likely would you rate the possibility that we might have a similar situation in other parts of the province? Obviously, so parts of the West Coast are difficult to reach right now. What is the likelihood that we'll see a similar situation elsewhere in the province? And if so, is there a specific part of the province that is giving your ministry concern when it comes to transportation?
Yeah. So there's an example of this right now with Tumbler Ridge, where they're in evacuation and the loss of highway access was experienced. We'll undoubtedly face similar challenges, and I think being prepared in every region for response, having crews, contractors, equipment mobilized and ready is the work that we have done to prepare for this wildfire season. And BC Wildfire Service, of course, will update British Columbians on the situation as it evolves. We're going into a different weather pattern coming up soon with wet and windy weather. There's different regional forecasts as well that will play a factor into what we are likely to experience in June and into July and into the rest of the summer.
Our next question comes from Kylie Stanton, Global News.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. Minister, it's clear the fire has made the slope particularly vulnerable to failure. Will long-term fixes be required to manage potential landslide risks, and is this something the province will have to manage on an ongoing basis?
Yes, so in this case, as Janelle mentioned, we've got barriers mobilized to get in there and protective netting for when we restore traffic through Highway 4. We will maintain that as long as we need to. There are crews about halfway through the upslope geotechnical inspection right now, so tree removal is happening of the dangerous trees that were referenced. That's the priority right now, and it's, as I mentioned, it's dangerous work, and we want all of our workers and contractors to be safe that are doing this work. We'll have more to say about that, but in this case, it's not landslide, but falling debris, rocks, trees that are the risk on Highway 4 at Cameron Lake Bluffs, and we're taking mitigation measures that will address those hazards. Janelle, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Landslides just with the resettling of the soil after it has been sort of loosened given the fire.
Kylie, do you have a follow-up? Kylie, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, we know this fire is human caused, and the fallout has been catastrophic, particularly for affected businesses. Is there any movement in terms of an investigation or leads into who might be responsible for all of this?
Yes, and I don't have an update for who is conducting that investigation or how far along it is. It's a good question for Minister Ralston when he provides an update later this week. I think it's also an opportunity to remind people about the risks and the extreme dry, hot conditions that we're experiencing in the province. And, you know, people have to be very mindful about how quickly these fires can spread, how much human impact they can have in terms of cutting off road access and damage to businesses, as well as threatening structures and communities and people's homes. And that can't be said enough in British Columbia, especially with the weather that's predicted this summer. It's always a factor in British Columbia. You've seen one of the earliest campfire bans that I can remember. As a precaution, there'll be other instructions to people across BC to take additional steps to make sure that they're not accidentally causing forest fires, wildfires, like what we're seeing in our province today.
Our next question comes from Daryl Greer, Canadian Press. Apologies, Daryl. We have got it sorted now. Please go ahead.
Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Perfect.
Okay. I'm wondering about the conditions. Maybe this is better for Minister Fleming or Ms. Straight. What are the conditions that would constitute, let's say, the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario that may allow this closure to not take so long to deal with?
So that scenario will be, all scenarios will be informed by the kinds of inspections, the geotechnical work that's being done right now. As I say, it's about half complete in terms of the slopes that have been looked at where tree removal activity has occurred. So I hesitate to give a range of scenarios at this point because I think it would be premature, and we need to gather all the evidence of what we're seeing up on that slope. And Janelle, you may have some additional information from your colleagues about what they're...
Once we get the highway open to single lane alternating traffic, which we do feel pretty confident that we'll be at that place going into next weekend. After that, we want at least 2 weeks to be able to monitor what's happening on that upslope. That 2-week time frame has been in discussions through professional engineers within our organization, as well as BC Wildfire Services, to understand the behavior of the soil in a slope following a fire. And that will give us better confidence to understand if we're in a position to remove or change any of the interim mitigation measures that would either require us to continue single lane alternating traffic or potentially remove that in the mid-July timeframe. But really just having those 2 weeks to be able to assess the patterns and the stabilization of the slope following the wildfire is going to be a critical piece for us.
Do you have a follow-up, Daryl? Do you have a follow-up, Daryl?
So what, if you were speaking to a resident who's trying to make plans for the next month, would you tell them to get out of Port Alberni, or would you tell them to, stick around and hunker down?
We're not telling anyone to do that at all. We're informing them on our activities to get that highway reopened as quickly as we can. We will continue to provide information. We'll continue to work with local governments, first responders, and others to make sure that the community is getting the supplies it needs. There's essential travel that's open. The alternate route is there for people who need to get in and out of the valley, and we're maintaining that. You heard the considerable amount of personnel that are making that temporary connection as drivable as possible, and it certainly is having an impact positively on making sure that people aren't running out of the kind of supplies they need to continue to live and work in the Alberni Valley.
Our next question comes from Ben Milcher, CTV.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
You're good. Thanks,
Hello?
Ben.
Okay. This is for Minister Fleming. In the Northeast, we see another wildfire encroaching on Highway 97, the Alaska Highway. As the last update, it was 2 kilometers from that highway. I'm just wondering what plans are being made to ensure that essential continue flowing into the communities north of any potential closure that could come if that fire should encroach on the highway.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this is a live situation, and obviously we will update people as quickly as we can based on what we're seeing and on the advice of all the agencies that we're cooperating with that are part of addressing that fire situation. There's nothing to my knowledge at this hour to inform your readers and citizens in the Northeast about that deals with the highway closure. But we've experienced that, as I mentioned earlier, in Tumbler Ridge recently, and we've updated the situation as highways were closed as a precautionary safety for reasons of that, and then reopened when it was deemed safe to do so. So we'll, as always, have the very latest information on Drive BC. We'll also use our regional office to work with local government and others and the agencies that are involved in addressing the fire situation there to make those determinations.
Follow up, Ben?
No, I'm good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Carla Wilson, Times Colonist.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the tourism hit on the west coast of Vancouver Island and what this kind of situation does for BC's overall reputation as a tourism destination. Is there going to be any efforts with tourism destination marketing, community, associations, or what can the tourist sector expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think our government has worked closely with the tourism sector on a whole number of things, recovering from the pandemic in a strong way, dealing with situations that we've experienced. Of course, the flooding in the atmospheric rivers occurred just before the winter ski season, and what we've tried to do is get people where they need to go as best we can. So there are some discussions about getting people in and out of Tofino and Ucluelet, for example, by air. There are some local carriers doing that. Really, the effort right now is to get the highway reopened as quickly as possible when it's deemed safe to do so. And so the information today gives some time horizon about when that is going to occur. But I think places all over the world that are dealing with changing weather patterns from climate change, whether it's the heat waves in Europe or fires in Greece and Portugal that we saw last summer, major tourism destinations are obviously working to make communities safe. Government has been working for some decades on programs like Fire Smart to make sure that communities are safe and fire guarded against these situations. We'll continue to do our best and work closely with business and the tourism industry to make sure that the marketing around British Columbia as a desirable place is strong, and certainly all the information we've seen recently, including a record year of travel on BC ferries and the rebound that we saw with YVR International Airport, suggests that people continue to want to come to British Columbia. It's one of the most popular destinations in Canada, and I expect will continue to be so. And our reputation as a place that mobilizes all resources and keeps people safe, I think demonstrates that we're very committed to a strong, robust tourism industry.
Follow up, Carla?
Yes, thank you. I was struck by the photograph showing the slope. How high is that slope, and at what distance, what elevation are rocks and trees coming down? How far are they falling?
I'll ask Janelle to answer.
I don't have an exact measurements of the top of that yellow dashed line, but in terms of the assessments are happening over 50 meters above the highway, and that's sort of the area of concern that we're looking at from a debris and a tree perspective coming down. All the way to the top is several hundred meters. It's a very significant slope with a great height of elevation.
Our next question comes from Seth Forward, Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Seth.
Hi there. I was curious if there's any concern for landslides with the coming rain.
So I think we had a question just previously about that. It's not particularly around soil landslides. It's around debris, trees, and other material that could come off the slope. Janelle, you may have some additional information to provide in response.
The terrain on the slope is actually fairly rocky, so it's not large volumes of loose materials. So we're not concerned about a landslide, but we are concerned that in those rain events, it will start dislodging trees, branches, rocks, those types of things. And that's the area of concern and why we're implementing these interim mitigation measures. And we'll continue to monitor the effectiveness of those, as well as put a critical lens on the highway if we do anticipate any significant rain or wind events.
Follow up, Seth? Follow up, Seth?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious as to what the message is to business owners, particularly on the West Coast.
I think the message is to continue to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. We're working with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, all of the different agencies that are trying to restore highway connectivity to those communities. We'll do our best, as we have been doing, to get all the goods and materials and suppliers and contractors to those communities to prepare for a tourism season that still lies ahead of us, and to make sure that they have all the accurate information they can have to plan for the reopening of the highway and what it'll look like in the different stages. And as we mentioned too, chambers of commerce, tourism associations are coming up with some ideas to get people into those communities who want to recreate there, want to spend their money, whether it's camping or at a resort. And we did that with ski resorts in the interior when they were temporarily cut off from highway access. And that's the approach that we're taking with those communities that are significant tourism destinations that are connected by Highway 4.
We have time for one more question. We'll go to Rochelle Baker, National Observer.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thanks, Rochelle.
Hello? Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering, it's good to hear that the landslide as a future issue as wet weather returns to the island isn't a long-term issue. However, one of the issues that's come up when I've been talking with folks being affected by the highway closure is that it underscores the long-term ask by communities for a permanent secondary route from the province. I'm wondering whether or not that's going to be a focus moving forward for the province, rather than relying on improvised detour routes when a disaster crops up.
Yeah, thank you. So the alternate route that we're using has had some investment to make it significantly more drivable than than the previous condition was. But what I would say is that about a decade ago, I know the previous government looked at an alternate route and making significant improvements after a very serious wildfire season in the area there. We will undoubtedly look at that again as we come out of this situation and recover Highway 4. We've invested significant dollars on Highway 4 improvements because there were some safety challenges on that route that had been long discussed, and we worked with the communities about how to make Highway 4 better. When it's restored, those improvements will be there for all to enjoy. The question of an alternate route, where it should be, how it may be built are things that we'll take a look at when we get through this situation. But for the time being, again, I just want to thank First Nations communities, local government leaders, the regional districts who have advised their communities, provided input on which alternate route is best. Obviously, the province has worked with private forest companies as well to create this alternate route, which is proving all of its worth in getting vital goods moved into those communities. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in today as we spend significant effort and time and ask people to do very dangerous work to restore Highway 4 for the use and enjoyment of all British Columbians.
Follow up, Rochelle?
Yeah, I think in line with some of my colleagues, I'm wondering too if, significant, having a significant number of communities which only have one access road, whether or not that's going to be something that the Modi's going to look at for many communities which face the same scenario, given that wildfires are on the increase and extreme weather is running upwards, whether or not that's going to be a focus and or a priority to evaluate which communities might need the development of the secondary route moving forward.
Yeah, so we always look at this, and I think in the wake of the atmospheric river, when it was coming down to a plan to restore Highway 8 through the Fraser Canyon and Highway 1, alternate routes were looked at and were nearly impossible because of the very difficult terrain. And it was deemed best to build to a very climate resilient standard the infrastructure that had been washed away into the river or heavily damaged. And we have spent significant sums of money and we expect the federal government to help reimburse that because that was a disaster that damaged our infrastructure. The work we're doing on the Coquihalla to make it be able to withstand these extreme weather events that we experienced in the case of those flooding scenarios are ones that the province is working on today. There are crews out working on those corridors. So in cases where there is a viable alternate route where improvements can be made, we'll look at that. We've certainly got a number of projects around BC where that has been done, but it's not always possible in every community to punch through a secondary route that would be pavable and made to a highway condition. But I think Highway 4, and given the investment we've made on the alternate route, as I said earlier, we're going to look at what would be both possible and feasible, and also looking at the learnings from this situation where a route like that should be.
Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's event.